All right, let's keep learning about Qt applications. Um, and I want to sort of talk about a big picture here and sort of make a full application that has a little more detail or uh, elements to it than the sort of single windows we've been popping up with a few things attached to them. So, as a review, the way you should be thinking about these Qt applications is that people do something like type or click, and that generates some kind of user interface event. The Qt system looks at where that happened and translates it into a signal. So again, there's these built-in signals in things like buttons and timers and so on. Um, and those signals are connected to slots, which we've done connection to two different ways. One connection to functions and one connecting to methods of a class, and both are fine. If you use a method, you have a little more freedom in that the method has access to the instance variables associated with the instance of the class. And so you can kind of pass some additional information into a method than you can the function. The function only accepts sort of predefined things like a value from a slider. If you want other things like an image or something like that, you have to go this class route. And so that's the way we're going to sort of do most of our applications. Now, in that last lecture, we inherited from an existing Qt class, QWidget. And again, a widget's is sort of a generic term for any sort of user interface element. So those buttons are widgets, sliders are widgets, frames are widgets, and so on. And if you look at the Qt documentation, there's actually a whole bunch of these predefined classes, and your job is to pick out some that seem useful to what you want to do and sort of get to know them a little bit. You don't have to know everything about them. So, for example, QWidget here is near the top, but there are things that build on it. This Q main window, Q frame, and then this sort of funny Q abstract button, which probably isn't like a real button, but allows some definition of other things to inherit from that are like real kinds of buttons, like the Q push button that we've used, and a Q checkbox, which we have not used. So there's a lot more than that, but this is just a glimpse that all of a sudden there's a lot of this inheritance going on to form a relationship between things. I don't know if you could hear the blast of sound from the other room there. I don't know what that was. um, all right, so we're going to look at this Q main window a little bit. So Q main window, as opposed to just a plain Q widget, has space for like a menu bar, these toolbars, or like a ribbon if you're used to the terminology from like Microsoft products, Microsoft Word, and so on. And then a main area to kind of put your normal interface type stuff, and then some kind of status down here. So I want to actually work with this Q main window to build an application. And the application I want to build is something that's going to load an image and then let us, zoom in and out on it. So scale it somehow. And again, as a interface to some kind of design, it's nice to kind of sketch out some ideas of what you might think might be a good way to arrange your widgets or what you want to have. You should have some sort of some image in mind of what you're trying to create. Or another route is actually to start making stuff and then sort of rearrange it as you sort of see like, oh, that's a little weird place for that or something like that. But here's my fancy design right here. I'm going to have something to hold an image, and we sort of know how to do that already. We did it with our image flip application. We used a label to hold that image. This is a slider. And we use a slider in the lab, and we're going to kind of connect these two things together. And then maybe I want some kind of menu here to do some actions like quit the program and maybe load a new image. All right, so what do we want to do? We want to start making an application. So um, let's go over, look at the code window here. So we have some imports, and again, I just like to steal them from a prior project, basically. And I mean, it's good to think a little bit about what you're importing, but for the most part, I'm using the same stuff. The basic structure of a Qt application is you have an application and you make it go, all right? And then you fill in the details in between. And so, what do we want to have? Well, I'm gonna make a new kind of class. Let's class, I'll call it image scale. And it's going to inherit not from QWidget like we did before, but from, in fact, look, you can kind of see it suggests QWidget here. Instead, I'm going to, well, it's going to take forever to get to it, but main window. So I'm inheriting from Q main window, and that again is going to provide me with some built-in stuff for like a menu bar and just a little more application-ready widget than just a plain Q widget. In our class, I need to do an init that sets up our widget, our application. And where do I want to start? Let's see. There's well, the first thing is we need to make sure that the actual QMain window part is initialized. And so I'm going to call the super class init. Oops, missed that there. Init. All right. And again, it's kind of easy to forget that. We actually have something that can, this image scale thing is now a custom class, but doesn't have any customization. It's basically exactly the same as the QMain window. But I'm kind of interested in what this might look like. So let's make an example of one of these image scale. And it doesn't start off with any information, and so I make it and I show it, right? So again, that's sort of the standard behavior we do for all of our applications so far. So these four things are sort of usually what your main function should be and how things get going here. Let's try running it. I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Okay, so actually I get a little something. I haven't told it to make it's hard to tell. It looks like a widget right now, but I haven't told it like to add a menu bar or any of that stuff. So it doesn't really tell us much about what's going on here. So let's kind of work on getting this part set up down here, this central widget. That's the main application. We can add in the menu later. And so again, the way you create one of these things or set it up is you make a frame to hold some other widgets. The frame is just a window of some kind. And I add a layout to the frame. And then to that frame, I'm going to add the other parts of the application, the label and the slider here. So again, you have to start thinking in layers here. And sometimes you can start at the bottom, like make the slider and make the label, and then figure out where they want to go. And other times you kind of have a vision in your mind about what kind of things you want to make. So when I call this init, again, I could put a whole bunch of stuff in here to kind of get this all set up, but it seems like PyQt likes for us to call this setup UI method that, again, we're actually writing. It's not a built-in thing. It's just sort of a convention. And okay, so that's sort of it. And here I'm going to define the setup UI. Oops, I always do that. Self automatically appears. And in the setup UI, I'm going to add the widgets to the central part. Okay, I'm having some trouble here. And for that, I need to have. Why is it complaining about indent expected? Seems like we're indenting just fine. Maybe it's just the comment. We'll see if that causes trouble. So we need a frame, and I'm going to make the frame a an instance variable because I might need access to it later. To be honest, I'm not sure if we really do or not, but I'll start off this way. So I'll make a Q frame. And again, a frame is just a holder for other stuff. It doesn't really give you any functionality, right? Then I'm going to make a layout. And because my widgets go, I decided I want to go this way. I want some kind of horizontal layout. And I have to go usually remind myself of what these things are, but there's a QH for horizontal box layout. And that's all you need there. And then on the frame, I'm going to set the layout. Set layout, and I'm going to give it the layout. All right, so again, this process happens a lot, and I think it's a little complicated because it seems a little redundant. We have something to hold something, then we have another thing that holds things, but it tells it how it really gets arranged, right? So the job of the frame really is really only to hold the layout, and then we are going to attach things to that frame. So so I'm going to set to my central window, which is I am a main window, right? Because I inherit from main window, so I am a kind of main window. And I'm going to set the central widget to be the frame. And the frame is not a local variable, it's an instance variable, so I have to use self. And why are you complaining? Okay, so slow. Okay, so again, this is a pretty standard thing. You set up some kind of thing to hold this other stuff, you put a layout on it, and then you attach the layout to the frame, and then you attach the frame to this QMain window thing that we are, right? So you're building a lot of connections between things, and it's easy to forget a step, to be honest. And so, kind of go slowly and build things up as you go. Now, we wanted to hold an image on a Q label and have a slider. So let's just make those things. I'm going to have a self, the image view equals a Q label. So this is kind of like what we did for the image flipper. And then I need an image now. And the question is where this image should come from. Let's store an image in an instance variable up here in init. And I'm going to make it from a Q image. Last time I used this Q pixmap. And again, on big systems, different classes have different capabilities. And the Q image happens to have one that allows me to like reset the size, scale the size to a different size. And so I had to go look that up, like, hey, if I want to have an image and I change the size, what do I use? And QPixMap doesn't allow me to do that, and QImage does. And so we're going to have to use the QImage and then convert back and forth, and it gets a little complicated. But it's kind of just like, it's part of that sort of research process of learning how to use a system. So I'm going to load the me image in here. And now on the Q label, I can set self.image view. I want to set the background basically, which is the pixmap. And so right now I have something that's in this Q image form, and I want to put it in this pixmap form. So this is kind of like the trouble we have in Python, where we read something in as a string, we want to use it as an int, we have to convert it, right? And so the way I convert it, and again, I had to kind of just like read some Stack Overflow kind of stuff for this, is I can send it to a QPixMap constructor that takes in a QImage and builds a pixmap from it. So this thing here turns the image into a QPixMap, and we send that QPixMap to the image view. All right, it's not that bad really, right? And then once I set up this Q label with itself in the image, I'm going to add to the layout, add a widget, and I'm going to add the self.image view. All right, so again, the way the process here is we build up the widget that we want, and then we attach it to the layout we want on the frame that we want, right? But you have to remember whether you're attaching it, do you attach it to the layout or attach it to the frame? You attach it to the layout and let the layout, which is attached to the frame, kind of handle that part. Then we need to make a slider. So I'm also going to store this in an instance variable. And there is a Q slider. And I'm gonna leave, you can set things on it. We'll set it pretty soon, but let's just kind of attach this to the layout. So add widget self.scale slider. All right, so again, how would you do this yourself? Basically, it's sort of pattern matching, right? You say, oh, I want a slider. Let me go look at the lecture's code about attaching a slider or making an image out of something, and you just follow along. The key is knowing that one, it's possible, and so you have to go look somewhere to do it. And the other one is kind of understanding the structure of it. And the structure of it's this stuff with like, okay, a frame has a layout and a layout has widgets inside it. And this widget could be another frame for example, that has its own layout and more things inside it. So you build up this levels of stuff, and that's where it gets a little complicated. But right now I'm just building up a structure that makes the UI look like I want it to look like. All right, so we don't have any ability yet on in our program, but we have some sort of structure to it, some visuals. So if I run it, I get this very nice image here, and I get this very nice slider. And again, the cool thing, of course, is that I get this slider behavior for free, right? Like the little blue line that shows how far up or down you are. And there's all sorts of options for adding like tick marks and all sorts of stuff to make the slider look kind of how you want. All right, so now we want it, when we change this, it changes the scale of this thing, right? So how do we do that? Well, we do it with connecting a signal from the slider, like its value changed, to some kind of behavior. And there is no built-in behavior that does it, so we have to write our own, and we're making our own slot in Qt terminology. So let's make the slot first, I guess, and then let's connect it up. So I'm going to define a scale image, and it's going to take in a scale value, and basically I want to figure out, based on that scale value, I want to figure out how big the image should be. Well, how big should it be? It should be the old size times this new thing. So I'm going to have a new width equals the image that's stored as an instance variable. That's what's nice again about using a method here, is that I can get to that image inside this slot, inside this method, without passing it as a parameter. And I ask it how big it is. So QImage has a width method that tells it how wide it is, and I'm going to multiply it by the scale value. And then I have a new height. So same kind of deal. Instead of the width, I get the height times the scale value. All right, so far so good. Now the next part's what I had to go research a little bit. It's like, how do you scale an image? And there's a particular call for it. So I'm going to create a scaled image, and I'm going to take the old image. So notice I'm not like taking the one I scaled last time and changing that, trying to figure out like, oh, it's growing from scale 4 to scale 5. How do I compute that? I'm just saying always start with the original, self.image, and then scale it. Scaled. So scaled is a method I learned that produces a new resized image. And I send in the new width and the new height. And you can tell, this thing's actually pretty general. Like I don't have to keep the same aspect ratio, so I could only scale one part of it. Maybe we'll do that later just for fun. And once I have that scaled image, what should I do with it? Well, I should put it on the label, and luckily I have access to that. It was the image view instance variable that we stored, and I want to set the pixmap to be the scaled image that is converted from an image into a pix map with scaled image. And there's something else. If I did it this way, when the image grew, like the whole GUI would grow along with it. And I just want to keep the window the size and just sort of like zoom in. So I'm gonna also say I want to tell the image view to set fixed size to be the self.image width and the self.image height. And I guess really technically I should probably just do this up in the constructor and just set it once. I'm just gonna leave that there for now in case I want to start playing around with it a little bit to see what else it does. All right. So I have this scale image thing. I have a slider that produces a value when it's changed, and I set up the original image. So the last thing I need to do is to connect these two ideas together, right? So I'm going to set the scale slider. It has a signal, value changed. So every time that slider changes, it makes it value changed. And notice when I did the autocomplete, it thinks I'm trying to call this thing, but really I'm just trying to get the name of it, because it's the name of the thing that's like that has this connect thing inside it, right? So I have to get rid of the parentheses there. And I'm going to connect this to self.scale image. So all this part up here, I missed one, is setting up the widgets and where they're sort of arranged and how they're arranged on the screen. This last part then sets up what happens when the interface is used. And so again, typically we have a whole bunch of these things. If you type something in a text box, it triggers something that, you know, captures your name and stores it somewhere or something like that. Okay, let's try running this thing. All right, so I actually zoomed up pretty fast there. Actually, if I get rid of this line, the set fixed size, let's just kind of play around and see what happens there. I'm not really that sure what's going to happen. Oh, it doesn't change it anyway, although, oh, it does change it, okay. But it's taking its sweet time to compute this. So what's the problem here? Why is this thing so long? Well, I don't know what happened there. Did it die? Yeah. I don't really know what numbers are being sent to scale image, so let's, okay, that's fine. Let's print them out and see what the scale value is to help us debug. And let's leave this thing alone because I think it was just struggling, this super giant image we made. So I make this and I start running it. Okay, so now the image is now 20 times bigger than it was before, which again is not so horrible, but when I was up here, it was like, you know, 50 times bigger or something. And I think it was just like 50 times, you know, it's like you know, 50,000 by 50,000 or something, you know, some very big image. And so it was struggling to work with that set of stuff. So let's try to make our slider be a little more well behaved. So I'm gonna, for the scale slider, I can set a minimum value, and I want that to be 1. And then I can also set a maximum. All right, so set minimum and set maximum, and we'll make it like 5 or something. Although to be honest, this seems to make it a little less fun. Okay, so we get this thing. Notice it doesn't zoom in the middle. I could probably do something to kind of make it center, not on my ear, but on my eyes or something like that. Notice there's 5 values here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's actually 4 values of which 1 to 5. So that kind of works. in some ways, I wouldn't mind having a wider range, and then let's kind of just play with the scale value. I don't know, new scale. Well, let's just change it. Scale value equals the scale value divided by 10. I want to be able to get a little more fine grain scaling capability here. So now it kind of gets more continuous, right? So that's kind of better. All right. So a lot of your job as a Qt developer is, one, understanding what these widgets are, and then two, figuring out which things are built in as behaviors and which things do I need to write my own code for. And then you just write a method for it and write a connection. And some of it's is sort of researching, like, okay, how do I set these minimum and maximum values? And you have to go Google around for a minute. But it only takes a minute. I mean, there's answers out there, right? You just Google it and see what it says, and just kind of, if it looks sensible, give it a try. And if it doesn't work, you try something else. So it's a little bit of a hit or miss stuff, but you're just sort of picking up sort of new ways of doing this kind of stuff. All right, so actually that's the main application, but I sort of promised you a menu bar. So let's look at that really quickly. So we have to ask the application for a menu bar. So it's basically, it knows how to make one, and we ask for it. And then we sort of can play with the look and feel a little bit with this call here. And then we add a menu to the menu bar, right? So there's menu bars, and then there's menus that go across, and then there's like menu items that are attached to a menu. So again, there's like layers here, and it's sort of a pain, to be honest, to set these things up. So let's make a menu bar, and I want the menu bar that belongs to the main window. So I ask for the menu bar, and I'm gonna set this menu bar native thing. Set native. Hey, come on, fill in for me or something. Set native menu bar to be false. And we can play with that later and see what it does. What is this complaining about here? Typo. Okay, yeah. It's not spelled like an English word. That's fine. Then I'm going to make a file menu, and I tell the menu bar to add a menu with a label of file. What does this do? I'm trying to think. It might be a hotkey thing. We'll try that out. So let's see if I run it. I was like running stuff, right? Don't go too far without running it. We run it. Hey, look, we got a very nondescript menu bar, and we have a file menu with no menu items inside it. So we need to add some menu items to it. I'm going to add an action, exit action, and it is a queue action. So this happens basically what happens when you make a menu item. And I'm going to give it the text for exit, and you have to say what it basically works on, and it works on this object, the queue main window, this image scaler object. And then we have to connect this action, and when it gets what's called triggered, so basically when something happens, when you pull down and release it, we want to connect to something that quits the program. So we're going to have to write a method to do that. Self quit program. And then I'm going to add to the file menu, add an action, exit action. All right, so kind of like all this Qt stuff, there's a lot of stuff you got to worry about, right? So it's like get a menu bar, get the file, make this Q action, which is the menu item, and then you connect it to some action when it gets pulled down and triggered, and then you have to say, hey, to the file menu, attach this action. And you can attach multiple actions to the file menu. So our quit program hopefully is something simple. So we're going to write a new class, def quit program. That's what I called it, hopefully. Self. And all we're going to do is ask the Q app to quit. All right, let's run this thing again. Here's this. Oh, our Q action has appeared. And we quit, and it's good. And if I run it again, let's try this hotkey idea. Let's see. It's not really showing it as a hotkey. Am I misunderstanding? I'll have to go research that. Maybe it's control. No. I'll have to go research that ampersand again. To see why we're putting an ampersand there. I suddenly forgot. And okay, so we have our menu. Let's just make a fake quick other action to add, so we can add two things to it. So let's have a load action equals Q action load. Sure, why not? Belongs to this thing. Should be a comma there. Oops. And I'm going to make the file menu add action of the load action. Now again, this thing's not set up with anything. I didn't write a method, I didn't do a connect, right? So it's just going to be hopefully some words. When I look at file, exit load, that would make most user interface designers freak out, right? That exit is the first one and load is the next one. I should have built them in opposite order. So that makes me very uncomfortable, but you basically add those things. You can add also, so besides the actions, the items, you can also add like spacers and stuff like that, which it looks more familiar. So for example, like here, not all the menu items are off my screen, so that's not really helping. Okay, so basically we've done what we wanted here. We have an application window. It has a menu bar, and again, you could just put as many things as you want there. And then it has a central window that has a frame in it with a horizontal layout, and attached to the layout is a Q label that has an image and a slider. And we did a little customization on the sliders to have its range of values be more manageable. And then we set up a connection between the slider and the label to make things scale the image when this thing changes. And notice, this is not the world's greatest application. I'm not going to go sell it or anything like that. But once I had the basic idea of how this PyQt5 stuff works, it wasn't really that much code to make something that does does something substantial, right? So there's a lot of built-in power here, and we need to learn to take advantage of it. So that's what we're working towards, and we're actually just about where we know how to do enough stuff to make our own project. But please look at this code. Please look over the slides, and I would try some stuff out. See if you can play with the scale, make it do something. Test your skills a little bit. All right, thanks. Have a good day. And my stop button's always hidden. I have to go find it. So.